Good evening, everyone. So you are watching our January 11th LCAAC meeting. Welcome, everyone. And I know we're all hopeful that we have a wonderful new year here kicking off. So we are called to order at 6:36. And Letty, for the host, are you able to mute anyone?
No, I'm not. I'm trying to do that right now as well.
Okay. All right. Just so we're able to hear, especially when we get to the presentations. But we'll start off here with roll call. So if you could, when you're called on, unmute yourself and let us know that you're here. And so we'll just go through our current roster. Brian?
Here.
Ann Dameron?
Present.
Kevin? Kevin Ching? No? Okay. Edward? Edward Liu?
Wait, he graduated, so
I
think the other staff rep is Devanshi, but she's not here right now.
Okay. Thank you, Nishi. And Nishi, you are president and your microphone's working. Excellent. Yen? Yen Chen? No? Okay. Divya? Divya Rani Belmukanda? No? Okay. Calvin?
I see her on the invite.
Divya. Oh, Divya, there you are, D. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Calvin? Calvin Hearns? No? Okay. Anna?
Voice only.
All right. Excellent. Twisha?
I'm here.
Great. Marinelle? Marinelle Lum?
She's trying to get on right now. I just saw an email from her.
Okay, great. Thank you, Letty. Crystal? I see your icon, Crystal. Is your audio working? Okay, chime in when you think that it's working. We just want to make sure everyone has full participation.
Hello? Can you guys hear me?
Excellent. Thank you, Crystal.
All right, there we go. Thank you.
Great. Gabriela? Gabriela Liseth Munoz Gill? Here? No. Okay. Larona? Larona, I knew you were here. I think Larona is one of the phone numbers, right? Larona, just let us know when you can that you're still good to be able to unmute. Okay. Michael has notified us he's really sorry. Unfortunately, he has a family member in the hospital this evening, and he's very sorry that he can't meet with us tonight, but he looks forward to the meeting and seeing everyone next month. Ivy?
Here.
Thank you, Ivy. All right, and it looks like we have, for our staff, we have Steve here, Letty here. Is Marcus, Marcus is unavailable because of the conflict, right? We had so many district meetings tonight. Okay, and then Trustee Jones.
Here. I'm here. Oh, sure.
Excellent. Oh, good. Okay, and Larona, you're good. Awesome. And then Trustee Campbell is not here this evening. Okay. All right. Excellent. So we're going to move on. Letty, did we receive any public comment for this evening?
We have no public comment this evening.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. All right. So for the committee, you have links to two sets of minutes. So remember, there was a glitch when we went to view the October minutes last month with the allowances. So now those should be cleared up. And then you also have the November 19th minutes. So now would be the time, for the record, if you needed to, if there were any inaccuracies or any amendments that you needed to bring forward, now would be the time. So we'll give a little bit of wait time there. Also the time to let us know that still something didn't work with being able to get let in to be able to view them. Okay. Okay. So aside from any amendments, which I'm not seeing, is there objection to approving those minutes? Any objection? Okay. All right. So seeing no objection, you have now approved the October 29th and November 19th minutes. And with that, we are very grateful to have some presentations tonight. The work that you are all volunteering to do by being here on this committee is so needed and so appreciated. And I know Trustee Jones could go on and on about how necessary this work is and how grateful we are to have all of you step forward to do it. We thought that it would be great for us to actually learn more about what unduplicated students are. So Letty and staff have done all they can, kind of, writing those definitions and putting it down, but really getting to know them and know what that's about. I think will really help have the committee have an even deeper understanding and start to feel who we're really serving. And hopefully that means you'll want to do this work for like another decade, because you're going to be so moved learning about these students. So we're going to start off with Greg Bailey, who as Director in Special Services. Greg, hopefully you can share a bit about what your department does, what that even means, because some of us student services, we think all of what people do are student services, but you have a very specific role. And then Greg, with his expert knowledge of specifically tonight, we're going to be looking at unhoused students. Greg is going to help us learn a little bit more about what that means for FUSD. And then following that, we have a presenter here from Schoolhouse Connection who specifically work to serve, and they can share more generally about the challenges and things that they feel, having worked with unhoused students, would really benefit from. So I am going to turn it over to Greg.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burbick. And I have about a 3-slide presentation. I don't know if you want me to show that, share my screen, or would you rather just have me use it as reading notes, whatever the committee would like?
I think that sharing screen is great. And so as long as Letty is able to have you do that, and I think Letty work that out too for our presenters here.
Yeah, everyone should be able to share right now.
Yeah, I'm doing it right now. Hopefully you're able to see that.
Yes, coming up.
Okay. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. When we talk about McKinney-Vento or in Fremont, our students without permanent housing, there's a lot of work that does go into supporting all the students. So these are just kind of a broad overview of where we are currently in Fremont Unified School District. As of today, we have roughly 228 students who are classified as McKinney-Vento or students without permanent housing. When I looked at the data from last March, when we went into shelter in place, we have increased by about 28 students. But we do have to remember, we had some students who left the district because of mobility, and then we also had some who graduated with us last June or in the summertime. And then, of course, some of the increase is just because of new enrollments coming to Fremont, and we open our arms to welcome them. One of the things I think is very important that Fremont Unified School District does do is we have a full-time family liaison position that is housed in our Student Support Services Department. That person works directly with our local support providers, our services, our students, and our staffs at our school sites. One of the things that we immediately do when we hear that we might have a student who is considered McKinney-Vento, they get immediate enrollment. Even without the proper documentation that we normally require, we waive that. We encourage that we get that at some point, but we do immediate enrollment. With that being said, during that time when we were in person doing enrollment, they also received a Chromebook, backpack full of school supplies, and that was sorted by grade level spans, either K through 2, 3 through 6, 7, 8, and 9 through 12. And we also have clothing available, jackets, sweatshirts, hygiene products, and shoes. And we also have gift cards for any food items that they wish. Also, in some situations, McKinney-Venti students may qualify for reduced credits for high school graduation. All of our high school sites are aware of that. We have our own spreadsheet that gets filled out for that with final approval from the parent, guardian, student, case manager, school site, and then finally my signature. Their diploma is equivalent to all the other diplomas within Fremont Unified School District. Another thing that MKV students have a right to remain at their current school site. Even if they move out or move to a different city, they do have a right to remain at that school site through the transition period, which means once they go into middle or high school, we might look at another option if possible. And then hopefully we never get to this point, but they do also have the right for representation at any discipline proceedings that might be facing our McKinney-Vento students. These are just some of, I didn't have enough time to list all the support providers that we work with, but we do work with abode services for some housing options for our families. We also work closely with the Alameda County Food Bank, and particularly now during this pandemic, we've seen an increase in that. We also work with East Bay Agency for Children, better known as EBAC. They help us with housing, rental assistance, and any food that is needed. We have a great relationship with the City of Fremont, in particular the YFS and the Fremont Resource Center, better known as FRC. They have a variety of topics that will support not only the student, but also the parent or guardian. And then we also work with the Safe Alternatives to Violent Environments, better known as our local SAVE shelter. We've done a lot of outreach with the SAVE shelter to make sure that the families are very comfortable enrolling their children at schools. It's very important when we have a family that is in the SAVE shelter, their address is not known to anybody at the district, including me. We typically put the district office as the address because we want to make sure that the students and the parent is feeling safe sending their student to school. So we hide the address. As a matter of fact, I never know what the address is. There are times when we meet families from the SAFE shelter. We go to the corporate office on Maury, or they come to the district office for that meeting. Another organization we work with is Bay Area Community Health, better known as BAC. They used to be Tri-City Health, and they also support us on a variety of topics, particularly in the medical field for our families. And then we work with a lot of local churches, mosque centers that help us support our students. The one thing that I think Fremont Unified is very fortunate to have is youth mentors. And as Victoria stated earlier, youth mentors are one of the things that the LCAAC committee does approve. In order to have a youth mentor at your site, you have to have 5 or more students without permanent housing on your site. If you have 5 or more, your site will qualify for a youth mentor. If you have 10 or more, then we give you 2 youth mentors. What the youth mentors are expected to do is they're supposed to have one-on-one meetings with each of their students at their site for at least 30 minutes with their student and or family, depending on the grade level and age level. We have a variety of topics. It all depends at what point of the year would we like that youth mentor to really stress with that family with any needs or wants that they might have coming up. We also have quarterly meetings with our youth mentors. We discuss whole group trends and what supports are needed. Before the shelter in place, we were really looking at our attendance rates and our college and career readiness rates to see where we were with our McKinney-Vento students. Also, the youth mentors will coordinate with my department for Chromebooks, hotspots, clothing, hygiene products, school supplies, and any other school-related fees. Particularly at the beginning of the year, when parents have to write that lovely check for all those extra things at schools, we cover the cost of all that. We just need to know what that student needed, and then we will reimburse the school so the parent or guardian does not have to pay for any fees. We also, in some situations, where a student might not be at the school that is very close to their residency or wherever they are staying, we will reimburse parents or guardians to transport the children to and from school. That seemed to be, we started out really about 2 or 3 years ago, and we have about 3 to 5 parents who are taking advantage of that. We also work with our transportation department. If we already have a route, maybe for some of our special ed students, that if we could fit it in, we would also transport that McKinney-Vento student if it fits in that route. What we've also started to do, probably, I would say 6, 7, 8 weeks ago, as you know, we are doing the meal pickups at some of our sites. What we have determined to do also with our McKinney-Vento students is doing an outreach to the parents to see if they would like us to deliver the meals to their residence or wherever they are staying. And we have about 6 to 8 families who are taking advantage of that. So what happens is that we coordinate with the warehouse in CNS, and then they will deliver those meals to whatever address that parent or guardian shares with us. But I think the most important thing is the youth mentors are a great way to utilize and to support our unduplicated students. We do have some sites who don't have 5 McKinney-Vento students. If that's the case, we really rely on the attendance clerk, the secretary, or the principals to be that youth mentor. And I know I saw Ann Dameron also on this call. It is a youth mentor could be certificated or a classified employee, so it does not have to be a certificated. We do have some who are in the classified ranks, and it's kind of nice because they sometimes have a different relationship. They have a lot of that personal contact every day with that parent or guardian if there's any issues with coming to school or getting school on time. It is something that we also discuss at our Alameda County Office of Education meetings, how this pandemic has really furthered the issues with some of our McKinney-Vento students. We believe that the 228 students that I gave you earlier is a little bit low, but it's hard for us to really know where those students are at this time. And I think that is a struggle that every district in Alameda County is facing right now. We thought we would have a little bit more students who would qualify. And we would talk about qualifying our registrars at the secondary schools, and then all the enrollment specialists in my department know there's key phrases when we have meetings with parents, when we talk about housing or proof of residencies. So everyone is trained at key vocabulary that if they hear something, they'll call me or Shaban, who's our family liaison, and then we will connect with the family and determine if that family qualifies as McKinney-Vento or not. I know I was very short, but it's such a broad topic. So hopefully I could shut down here.
Oops, wait. You muted yourself, Greg.
I'm sorry, Letty, it's Monday, right? There's a lot more that we could probably discuss and how we handle situations. I think what we do as a district is very valuable for students because we look at each case individually to find the proper supports. So sometimes we have about 3 to 5 families who are living in vehicles. So we are looking for a safe place for them to park their cars at night. So it just kind of depends on that, what the family needs and more importantly, what the student needs. And we get that information from either the secretaries or the youth mentors in many situations. But we will do whatever we can to make sure that that student is welcome in Fremont. We also work with, I'm drawing a blank, I think it's called First Five. And it's they will close, they have clothing, new clothes for our students, where it's done by appointment. Students will go in, it's an individual shopping event. That has been stopped since shelter in place. There are a lot of restrictions with that. In particular, if you make an appointment and don't show up, you can't go for another year. But it is something that we also promote with our students and our families as a service that they could reach out to. That was my short presentation. And I don't know if you want me to answer questions, Victoria, or if there's another presentation after me.
I thank you so much, Greg. I think a couple questions is good if it's specific to this presentation. Now would be a good time. So you can go ahead. I'm going to start with Lorona that I saw pop up first, but then everyone else, if you could go ahead and raise digital hands if you'd like. And we'll try to wrap up questions on this in the next 10 minutes so we can move on to the next presentation. But I think there'll be more time as we go on into discussion as well. Lorona?
Okay, so my question is to you. What if you wanted to donate, you had extra clothes, clean clothes that's around the house that's in like good condition? Are we able to donate?
Yes, we will take those items. That will be coordinated with me and Shaban. Of course, we'll make sure that the clothing is in good shape. But yes, we will take any donations. We also have some of our high schools are having a student store where they also have clothing that students can pick up free of charge. So yes, we will take any donation that we could get our hands on. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Oh, sorry, Anna. Yes, I'll come to you right after Ivy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Divya?
Hi. Okay, so I'm on, right? This is Ivy.
Sorry, Ivy. I'm going to have Divya and then you.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So my question is regarding the students when they first come into this situation. I mean, including students, their families may be confused, and in order for them to pass through that situation and get to a normalcy, I know that there are many resources which are helping. But are we connecting them to other families and the students to other students who have been in a similar situation so that they could learn and also get pointers about how to navigate the situation and then sort of adapt to and look forward to what other resources they have, etc.
We make sure when the parents come in that they get a list of all of our resources. We normally give them a pamphlet, but we do not share other families who might be in the same situation for confidentiality reasons. So that information will not be shared with anybody else besides the principal and the teacher or teachers of that student. We don't give this information out to any parents who might be in similar situations, unfortunately.
Yeah, I do understand that. It's just that if a student finds another family or students, again, may not be in the same class, but at least like 4-5 years above their grade or whatever, if they know that there is another family, may not be a real family, maybe a telephonic conversation or whatever, they may have some concerns, they may have some questions, which they will be able to communicate well and get to learn from the live example rather than from pamphlets.
Yeah. I will definitely take that into consideration and discuss this with Shaban.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. Ivy?
Hi, Greg. So you said that there are 228 MKV students right now, and they are, but there are only 18 sites that qualify for a youth mentor. So so they're pretty spread out then. I guess the 228 students are spread out. So the 18 sites, are they mostly high school, junior high, or elementary schools? Yeah.
Good question, Ivy. Since Fremont is very large, they're kind of spread out. But what I can tell you, I believe all of our high schools and maybe all but one of our junior high schools do qualify. And then we have about 8 or 9 elementary schools that have 5 or more, so they also qualify. But I think some of our challenges, Ivy, as you said it, is that we are very widespread. So it's very hard sometimes to coordinate maybe some after-school activities where everyone could get to, because of the locations they're coming from are all over Fremont.
Right. And the youth mentors are district staff then? They're all volunteers, or are they?
It's another good question. Youth mentors is actually a stipend position. It's classified or certificated, and they get paid on the hourly rate. But it's hourly rate per month. They have to turn a time card into me, and the calculation is roughly 30 minutes per student. There are some cases something might be going on that we could extend that to maybe an hour per student, but that is something that we'll work out with the youth mentors. If, particularly as we get close to graduation time, we might want to spend some more time with our 11th and 12th graders and make sure that they have a plan for college. So we might increase that time period from 30 minutes to an hour in some situations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ivy. And then something else for us to have on our radar before we're still moving through on this for a few more minutes, but for the committee's kind of mindset as we move forward, as Greg mentioned, LCAAC funds a lot of this. We make the choice to use some LCAP funds for this. So these are really good questions because Greg is showing you what we currently do, and we can always look at how we expend resources next year. And I know Letty is working to have business do budget stuff for us next month. Not only are we underspent in some categories, but we did just hear in the governor's update that he's going to try to allocate more services for the target population that we're looking at. So it could be something that we actually decide to invest more in if the committee feels that that's worth it. Anna.
Hi there. Just so you know, I've got a background in some of this in that. And so recently I was a licensed foster parent. But my question is, are there any items that cannot be donated towards these students? Because I know people start throwing all sorts of stuff, this way. And, it's, great that they've got that in their heart. But I know that there are some items that are not donatable.
Yeah, anything that is homemade food, we of course do not allow that to be donated. There's even some technology restrictions because we do have new Chromebooks that we give out to new students when they come in that are McKinney-Vento. Right. So we kind of push back on some of the technology because they get outfitted with a Chromebook and then they get a replacement if something happens to theirs. And we also have been giving students hotspots, and particularly the last couple of months, they have needed it. Some of the clothing, of course, we'll take a look at it to make sure that some of our families would be able to use it. We also received a donation, I believe, last year of a lot of infant items because a lot of our families also have small children. So we have diapers and some formula and stuff like that that we would also give to our families in need. So it is something that is, when it comes to donations, we take it on case by case, and then ultimately I'll make the final decision if we would accept it or not.
Okay, and you're the person to contact if we have donations?
That's correct.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Anne?
I just want to add a couple things to what Mr. Bailey said and referred to about the liaison, Shaban. When students are enrolled, if they're siblings, they try very hard to make the placement at one school, so the family's only they have multiple kids in elementary, they get them all in one school, and then the 18 schools that qualify for liaisons, those liaisons work closely together because in many of the cases, there are siblings in multiple grade level schools. So the coordination and the thought that goes into what's going to work best for the students and the family is very much appreciated at the sites.
Thank you, Anne. All right, so I still have Ivy, but I did you have another question, Ivy, or is that from before?
Sorry, I need to lower my hand.
Okay, no worries.
Victoria, this is Yen Chen. I'm on the phone.
Oh, great. Okay, Yen, I'm glad you were able to hop in. We'll note that you're here. Did you have a question for Greg?
Yeah, I've been listening. I have a question is, we do all the system, and it was noted that they go through the district offices, and it's a very big bureaucracy. You get said go to our partners, come to the district, go to the school. You have liaison. So I just want to make sure something to offer, or it's a suggestion, offer to make sure that they can go back to a contact. You go to a school and you lose track of the school, and you don't know if you should go back to the school offices, or the liaison lose track of them, and how do you get back? And so we also got to make it easy for them to get back into the system too. So, and that's typically near the very beginning of the process.
Thank you, Yen. Greg, did you want to share a bit about how that intake works?
Yeah, the intake works is enrollment specialists or registrars would contact myself or Shaban. And Shaban is our family liaison. So she is the one that will have direct contact with parents, either via text or emails or phone calls. So Shaban is really the main contact once that student qualifies to McKinney-Vento. When it comes to meeting parents, we are meeting at people's homes right now. We are meeting at hotels, apartments, motels, parking lots. We will meet the parent anywhere and everywhere. But Shaban is that one person that does all the reach out. So anytime that we get a new support or anything that might be a benefit to our students, it comes from Shaban. So the parents know that, oh, this is coming from the district, so I'm going to pick up that email or pick up the phone call from Shaban, because that is very important to make sure that they're comfortable with whoever they're dealing with. And Shaban is that person for Fremont Unified right now.
Yeah, so when we look at the, just some thoughts is that there is a single point person. That person is very important. I just want to make sure we fund that, properly. You get kind of mixed in there, and then the shuffle.
Yeah, thank you, Yen. All right, so we have Divya, and we're going to move on to Erin from School Bus Connection.
Yeah, sorry about that. I have a follow-up question. So, two things. I hope, Shaban, you are taking care of the security, both for you and for the people who are meeting you whenever these meetings are happening. And the second thing is, I really wish that we have a website in which we can have all this information collated together and have the people who are handling this, etc., so that you can guide them. Again, not everybody maybe takes time to go there and see, but for example, you are soliciting any donation, you can put all the items that are donatable or the wish list from the families, from the students, etc., so that you can connect one-on-one with the people who are willing to donate versus the needs that are arising. Also, whenever you are doing these meetups, to actually set up a place, to set up the items that are needed for that, etc., if you have that list on a website, it would really be useful for the people. And I do know that even though some people are homeless or some people are in a difficult situation, they always have a mobile phone with them, because that is a primary need, and they will always be checking these resources very actively, so that they can expect that these things are going to come. So a website will really be helpful for all these situations.
Thank you so much, Divya. All right, excellent. Great. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And I'm sure this isn't the last time we'll be calling on you in your department. So thank you very much for your help. All right, and with that, I'm going to welcome Erin Patterson from Schoolhouse Connection for her presentation, and I believe you're able to share screen as well, however you'd like to present.
That's great. Thank you so much. I am trying to multitask and not being successful at the moment. So I'm pulling my slides up, and while I do that, I just want to say thank you so much to all of you for inviting me into your conversation and letting me share with you. I'll say at the outset that for those of you who are on phone, I'll be sure to email these slides to maybe Victoria so that those can be circulated and you can have this information. And what I really hope to do is tell you a little bit about who Schoolhouse Connection is. And then just add some surrounding context to the great information that Greg was able to share, including what we mean by student homelessness, just to make sure we're all clear on all the various situations that covers, the likelihood of experiencing homelessness across different student groups, and hopefully you have in mind your particular school system demographics and can do some mental work there. And then what this means for our students and the impacts, and then offer you some considerations. Obviously you are the experts, and so all I hope to do is pose some probing questions as you go into budget considerations and moving forward into planning for next year. Schoolhouse Connection is a national nonprofit organization, and our mission is to overcome homelessness through education. And this is a very particular mission, and what Greg was just talking about really exemplifies this. It's a recognition of the fact that education, having a high school diploma or a GED equivalent, is the single greatest determinant of homelessness. That if you are a young student experiencing homelessness and you are able to obtain your high school diploma, then the chances that you as an adult and future generations will experience homelessness almost diminish. Whereas we know from our adult homeless population that most of them were not able to obtain a high school diploma or GED equivalent. So when Greg talks about all the work that he and his liaison and school site contacts are doing, that is really critical work to make sure that these students are connected and remain connected to educational opportunities without interruption. I want to say just a note here about some terminology that you'll hear me use. Schoolhouse Connection uses the term students experiencing homelessness, and it's a little bit longer and a little bit more of a mouthful, but we do that for two reasons. One is because we never want to attach an identity to a student, and so if we say homeless student, then that makes it sound as if that is who they are. And we believe that any student who is experiencing homelessness is only experiencing that for a temporary time, and hopefully we can minimize that experience. The other reason is you'll hear other schools or districts or in other places, you'll hear other terminology like unhoused. The reason we stay away from unhoused is because the federal definition that allows money to flow to districts is pretty expansive, and it recognizes students who might be what we call doubled up, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. But that applies to your students as well. And so a student could be technically in a house, but it's because they had no other alternatives and they are doubling up or couch surfing with another family, and it's unclear how permanent that situation will be. And so that's included in homelessness. And so that's why you'll hear me say students experiencing homelessness. Schoolhouse works in a variety of ways at the federal policy level, state policy, community of practice, and we have a network of young scholars that informs our work greatly, and we're honored to learn from their experiences. So really briefly, student homelessness, here's some big picture numbers for you across the nation. 1.5 million is the number of school-age children from pre-K to 12th grade who are considered homeless under our federal McKinney-Vento definition. An additional 1.4 million children under the age of 6 are considered homeless. You can see that 1.1 million children who are born to young parents experiencing homelessness, and then 4.2 million youth and young adults ages 13 to 25 across the country. And you'll probably hear Greg and others in your district refer to unaccompanied homeless youth, and that's who we're referring to, or those older youth. This is what it looks like when we talk about homeless under the education definition. You can see that this includes families or individuals who are in shelters or transitional housing. Those who are unsheltered, Greg mentioned some families who are in cars or trailer parks temporarily, that's included here. Hotels and motels, if you can't find the money for your rent, but you have enough money to be in a hotel for a week, that is considered homeless because you don't know what's going to happen when that week and that money is up. And then our doubled up category, which, as I mentioned, is you're staying with others because you have no other alternative. This is just a quick look at what how Fremont Unified students experience homelessness, and this is just a breakdown of data that's available nationally that's sourced through your district and state. And so you can see it's pretty on par with the national numbers. Most of your students experiencing homelessness are in the doubled up category, so they're staying with others because they have no other alternative. And then you can see hotels, motels is about 10%. Your shelters is about 15%, and then 2.5% who are unsheltered. And again, those are the cars and trailer parks that Greg mentioned. Obviously, there are a lot of different roads to homelessness, and we like to remind ourselves at Schoolhouse that any one of us are one breath away from finding ourselves experiencing homelessness. I want to touch on the likelihood of experiencing homelessness for certain student groups. And again, this is where I'm going to ask you to think about your own school system demographics as I'm going through here. The first breakdown is by race and ethnicity. And the big takeaway here is that white students and students who identify as other in the race and ethnicity category are the only group who are less likely to experience homelessness based on race. Black, American Indian, Alaska Native, and Hispanic students all experience homelessness at greater rates than the general student population. And I think the main takeaway here is systemic racism and historical racism has led to a lot of policies and practices that make this true for many families. For our LGBTQ high school students, they're almost 3 times as likely when compared to heterosexual students to experience homelessness. And our transgender students are almost 10 times as likely to experience homelessness when compared to non-transgender, cisgender high school students. This is often because, anecdotally, because a student may come out to his or her family or to their family and are shunned, are kicked out, find themselves in an abusive situation because of their identity. And this leads to the experience of homelessness for these students. So I want to touch on the impacts of homelessness. A lot of these are pretty common sense, but I think it's worth saying out loud what this does to a young person when there is a lack of consistency in their living and home situation. We know that students experiencing homelessness are among the most academically vulnerable. You can see that while the graduation rate across the country is around 85% high school graduation rate, for our students experiencing homelessness, it's about 20% lower. Again, because they often experience interruptions in education, moving from one location to the next. And just to underscore the work that Greg and his team do, this is why it's so important to maintain that consistency in their educational opportunities. Experiencing homelessness also leads to a lot of other factors that aren't necessarily academically related, but can play into how a student shows up at school every day. Average hours of sleep per night. This is something I think we often take for granted. Students experiencing homelessness are more likely to get fewer hours of sleep. Trying alcohol before or by the age of 12. Students experiencing homelessness are twice as likely. Being bullied at school or electronically. Again, students experiencing homelessness are almost twice as likely to have reported being bullied. Students experiencing homelessness are also much more likely to report having been depressed or having hurt themselves or engaged in self-harm on purpose. And students experiencing homelessness, unfortunately, are much more likely to attempt suicide and to attempt suicide more than once. Obviously, COVID-19 has exacerbated this problem. It's a domino effect. Because of social distancing norms, there are fewer shelter beds or shelters available. Eviction moratoria, while in place, they actually fail to protect most families that qualify for McKinney-Vento assistance because those families are doubled up and the owner of the home doesn't count as a landlord and so isn't restricted when it comes to deciding to kick a family out. You can see here many working parents are essential workers. School closures and remote learning all plays into the experience of homelessness. And obviously economic stress is at an all-time high right now. And so then there are challenges associated with that because of COVID. The first and biggest challenge is identifying children and youth who are experiencing homelessness when we are no longer in person. We are in a remote learning situation. What we're seeing across states and across districts is actually the numbers of students are decreasing, but that's not the reality. It's only because students aren't being identified at the same rate because we're in a remote learning environment. This is where liaisons are critical. This is where teachers are critical. Usually in an in-person classroom situation, a teacher's able to build a relationship with that child, with that student every day and notice when things change, notice when something is off. It's harder in remote learning. And so one of the resources we offer from Schoolhouse is just a quick tip sheet. Here are the signs to look for in a virtual learning environment. Things like the background is always changing, or the student never wants to turn the camera on. And that in reality, that's often because they're in a shelter setting, they're in a motel, they're embarrassed of their surroundings and background, or they want to maintain their privacy in that regard. And so identification is really critical because until we identify a student, we can't offer them those great services that Greg was talking about. There are also critical safety and basic needs. And then this idea of access to education, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in just a minute, but continuation of education is absolutely essential. And then of course, during this time, it's more likely that students and children will be more transient because of evictions, because of the eviction moratorium not covering their particular situation. So my big question that I would love for you all to consider and that I'd love to offer you some probing questions around is, given that you're gearing up to go into budget conversations, how can your budget reflect the needs of students experiencing homelessness and show that you are prioritizing these students? I will say at the outset, this year in particular, because of COVID-19 and the impact that we're seeing it have on both state and district budgets, one signal that you can send that you're prioritizing this population is maintaining level funding. We often like to ask for more and more funding, but maintaining and not cutting funding in some of these service areas is a big signal that you recognize the needs of these students. So there are three buckets that I'm going to talk about really briefly. The first is how to think about how you're supporting and funding personnel. The second is access to education, particularly during COVID. And then the third is this direct student supports category, these student level supports. So when we're talking about personnel, we're talking about district, Greg and his liaison and others across the district, but also all school building personnel, your principals, your administrators, your teachers, your classified employees, everyone. And the first thing we encourage districts to do is look at the data. What does your data say about the areas of greatest need? And I'm so glad, I can't remember who asked the question, but the question was about where you are seeing more students experiencing homelessness. And it sounds like you have more in the junior high and high school ages. And so we really encourage districts to look at how you've matched up your services and personnel, because a high school student is going to have needs that are different from an elementary or early childhood student, and to really take that into consideration. And then thinking about how you're informing and training all personnel about the needs and best practices to serve students. So that would be things like when your teachers go through their pre-service professional development days, In addition to getting the mandatory court reporter training on recognizing child abuse, are they also hearing this information about student homelessness? Do they know who their building level point of contact is and how to go about that process? Do they know who Greg is? So making sure that you're sharing information with all personnel. I want to say something about access to education during COVID. It sounds like you all already have a plan in place and have distributed laptops or Wi-Fi hotspots, those sorts of things. So one thing to think about is how you're prioritizing students experiencing homelessness and being able to receive technology. Without it, they cannot participate in education. Are you able to offer in-person day centers for students experiencing homelessness? We've seen this pop up across districts across the country who recognize that students experiencing homelessness are not in a stable environment when they're outside of school. And so COVID has really hurt their ability to focus and learn. And so they've said, while school buildings are closed to the majority of the student population, if we can safely open a classroom or two in a couple of our buildings so that our high schoolers can come here, our middle schoolers to another location, and our young children to another, then maybe that will help provide the stability they need in order to continue their education without interruption. Similarly, thinking about your youngest children, ages 6 and under, any preschool age children you have who are experiencing homelessness, if you're able to offer an in-person learning center during the day where they can come instead of having to rely on Wi-Fi at a shelter or finding a hotspot somewhere. And we're also seeing sites for early childhood across the country offer extended day services, specifically prioritizing students experiencing homelessness. When we talk about direct student supports or student level supports, this can be a variety of things, and I'll touch on a few of them. This idea of covering costs associated with learning is huge, and we see a lot of success at sites who are able to offer comprehensive assistance with this. That covers everything from the cost to graduate, the cost to take the SAT or ACT, library fees, extracurricular fees or athletics, any sort of cost that's associated. And it sounds like Greg and his team have done a fantastic job of setting up that infrastructure and system already in Fremont to be able to not only cover some of those costs, but offer clothes, offer food, offer practical assistance when needed. This idea of assisting students bridge to post-secondary opportunities. In a normal year when we're not remote, this would be things like arranging for visits to college and university campuses if that's their decision, and covering the cost of transportation or lodging. Since we can't do that, the other thing to think about here is for students who are looking at applying to college, FAFSA is absolutely necessary, and it is a struggle for many students experiencing homelessness because they lack the documentation, they lack the papers that they need in order to fill out that FAFSA form and be eligible for financial assistance. It takes a lot of manpower from guidance counselors and liaisons and others to be able to help them work through the bureaucratic mess of getting the correct documentation or getting a waiver for that documentation, particularly for our unaccompanied homeless youth who are essentially on their own. So a 16 or 17-year-old who is on their own, who can't get a parent signature, who doesn't have that kind of information that they need. That takes a lot of manpower and training. And there are also some changes to FAFSA that are coming up. And so districts, I think, are starting to think about how they can put funding and support behind training their staff to be able to help students make that bridge more seamlessly. The last two things I want to highlight here are school-based health and mental health services. Given the impacts on students that I outlined a little bit earlier, particularly related to bullying, depression, suicide, it's absolutely critical that students not only have access to educational opportunities, but also access to mental health services and physical health services. I think this is going to become even more critical when states start to think about maybe requiring the COVID vaccine to go back to school. And when a student doesn't have a regular primary care physician, one of the things that McKinney-Vento allows for is for districts and schools to use those funds to be able to get the necessary vaccination, make referrals for doctors, dentists, eye doctors, things like that. So thinking about where your district already has it covered and what else needs to be in place. And then outside of the district too, it made me so happy to see that list of partners that Greg posted earlier. And so just thinking about how you're leaning on them and partnering with them for things that you either cannot provide or things where you need greater impact. And one successful strategy we're seeing across the country is setting up a fund within a community foundation, if you have one. In the past, a lot of community foundations will say, if you donate, you can earmark this money to go to technology in schools or, fill in the blank. But if you can work with your community foundation and donors to set up a set-aside fund for students experiencing homelessness to help Greg and his team better identify where supports are needed to be able to have clothes and food readily available, then that's something to think about as well. I will stop there and open it up for questions. And I just want to say thank you so much again for letting me be here with you all.
Thank you so much, Erin. So I see Anna.
Hi there, I finally got connected. Erin, thanks so much for bringing this presentation in, this absolutely valuable. Just to let everybody know, I'm not sure if everybody knows, I know Diane Jones knows because I contacted her earlier, but the city of Fremont does have, through their Parks and Recreation Department, something called school pods. And that's where school-age students can go in a very safe environment that is sanitized throughout the day, health checks, temperature checks, throughout the school day. Kids go in and they connect with their distance learning. And there's 5 or 6 adults that are there to help them stay connected. Either they're having a technology issue or they want to go off and play when they really should be connected to their classes, things like this. I'm aware of this because I'm sending my daughter to this. She's been there since August. Nobody there has gotten sick. And it's been very, very stable. And part of the program also feeds them nutritious lunches, and they get snacks, they get outside time, they get physical activity, they get arts and crafts. So it's beyond just school. But they do get this. And yes, there is a cost for those of us who can afford to do that, but there are also scholarships for those in need. If they can prove the need, they get to be there for free. But they have to be able to behave. They need to have a laptop. They need to have a headset to be able to connect. And also, they're to give their schedule of their classes and how to contact the teachers and things like that. So there is that available. But I don't know how widely known this is or if people are ignoring it or whatever. Right now, and since this past August, there's only been 10 students registered in this continuously on a month-to-month basis. But it's been proven to be very, very successful. That when the kids have issues or they have a homework question, there are adults there to help them. They have both male and female. It's been a very successful program. And I'll stop because it sounds like somebody else wants on.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, we can let Greg know. I think that was something that we've seen presented at the joint city council and school board meeting. So there was a presentation done about that. So I think maybe we can connect with Greg to see if there is a pamphlet that actually highlights that, where that need is there in the presentation. And granted, we all know how presentations can go. It was kind of an afterthought at the very end of like, oh, there's 4 need scholarships, but that might not be something that is, no, it could be completely free under certain conditions. Because I think when I'll use I terms, if I hear scholarship, I still think there could be a lot of that.
Okay.
Yes, I got a question. What about kids that you don't know for sure if they suffer from dyslexia? Like, how can you go about getting a test to see if they have dyslexia, and then to see if they can start getting assistance with that?
So, Lorona, that might be a question more for Letty, because we do have already existing, we've in the last couple years rolled out dyslexia identification, which was, I think, with updated legislation. Letty, did you want to speak on that?
Maybe what I can propose later on the agenda, we're going to speak about some more topics that are going to come up, and that might be a place to revisit it, and we can agendize it. Absolutely.
Thank you. Yes, because Lorona brings up a good point. At-risk students of all kinds are way less likely to have their needs of various kinds identified. So I don't imagine that students experiencing homelessness are any exception, right?
Right.
Yeah, I just had a question about like the outreach methods. For example, like if a student isn't recognized by like a teacher to be like homeless or anything, are there like resources? Like I'm sure there are resources that they can connect to, but I feel like they might not know about that. So like, are there any outreach methods to let them be aware of like the fact that there are resources in place? And is it possible to make it more like widely known? Like I know high schools have like these things like Maze Days each year where we get like a packet of information. So including this information about like the resources that you can find if you ever find yourself to be homeless, because like you mentioned, it could happen anytime, right? So including that type of information in those Maze Day packets, just to have it like readily available might be really helpful. But I wasn't really sure about like what outreach methods you already have in place.
Thank you, Nishi.
And Greg, I don't know if you want to answer that from the district perspective, and I can add some additional context.
You bring up a very good point. What we do is I think we do a good job collaborating with the office staff, administrators, and counselors. But I think what we need to do a better job is advertising to the general community. So I am taking some notes that maybe Letty, myself, and Brian Kilgore and Bart Payne, our web designer and our public communications officer, have a meeting to see how can we promote this to make sure that all of our community is aware of all these resources. In particular, to do it throughout the year, because like Aaron stated, it could happen to somebody next week all of a sudden. So it is something that I am making notes. So I did appreciate that comment. And I will work with Letty, Brian, and Bart to see how we could promote this to make sure all of our families know how to access resources if they need it. So
yeah, and one more thing I wanted to add is like sometimes, or like when I'm reading like district documents or whatever, there's like a lot of jargon involved, which I get confused by. So when we're like offering like resources, I'm not sure if there's like this type of jargon involved, but it might be helpful to like break it down into more like simple like day-to-day terminology so that people who aren't familiar with them can understand them really quick. And like I'm sure Surf would be happy to like collaborate if you guys ever need our assistance.
And I'll just add, I'm so glad you brought up that point. And I'll just add that we've also seen a trend where schools and districts are getting away from a one and done enrollment question process to determine if students are eligible to, just like Greg just mentioned, like a mid-year touch point. Because it's even more transitional now, especially under COVID. And then I love the point that you raised about the jargon. It's so true. And bad news, like the older you get, it doesn't get any better. I constantly am Googling things on my phone. And another thing we're seeing is simplification of those enrollment questionnaires, particularly staying away from the word residency, because that's a red flag for a lot of families. And instead saying, do you, and then asking 2 or 3 questions. Do you live in the same place every night? Do you live with another family by choice or not? So some questions like that can be geared more towards a student. And then it's also really important to ask if they have younger siblings in the home, because that can help identify younger and earlier.
Victoria, this is Yen Chen.
Yes, Yen.
There's 2 items that I heard. One is graduation or GED is very important. And so, as the district, we have an idea of who's going to basically cross the line and basically graduate. If they're not going to graduate, is there support for the GED portion? I know that we have the continuing education and the adult school, but we know way ahead of time about which students are going to basically maybe need to get the GED. So that's one comment. That's something that maybe the district can kind of think about. The other one is the financial aid. We know that all these high school students, and I remember back many, many years ago, 40 years ago plus, having to fill out these forms. And it's still the same. I'm helping my nieces, and it's during their senior year in high school that they're filling out these forms. And so basically, it's still part of the K through 12. And I think, the district needs to kind of think about either bringing in the partners that might be able to help support it, or the district itself being able to support this particular aspect. And again, it might not only be for the company minors, but for all the population that is there.
Thank you. Yeah, and Greg could maybe speak, because in Greg's maybe I'm incorrect. Counselors, I also associate to a certain degree with Greg's department district wide. So Greg, I don't know if counselors sometimes fill that need. What are some of those thoughts if they bring in paperwork that's for that next level?
That would be our counselors at our high schools that will sit down with that student. And I think Erin stated in her presentation, I did the FAFSA for my own children, and I'm in education, and I struggled for days and days to try to figure out that thing. So it is something that's very challenging. But I did want to make a comment about the GED and diploma. We will do our best to steer the student to a diploma track. Sometimes they qualify for reduced credit, which is 130 in California instead of our required 230. There is some content area specific number of units per content area that they must achieve. But we also, if a student can't make it in 4 years, we will offer additional years for that student to get their diploma, because as Erin stated, one of the key indicators for homelessness is high school diploma. So we really encourage students to complete their high school diploma. To be honest with you, we will push a kid to the diploma. Our very, very last resort is that GED. We want the students to really earn that high school diploma. But Victoria, to answer your question, it would be the counselors working with the forms, and I'm making myself a note to that to make sure we continue to do training for our high school counselors on that, particularly as Erin stated, if they're changing some of the FAFSA requirements or document, because that thing is a beast and a half to complete.
Yeah, and also a lot of that is online now. As I was trying to help my nieces with it, they are filling out those forms online, and they're having to basically work through those issues.
Okay. Letty, you have your hand raised. Did you for this item?
Yes, so just thank you to Erin, and I learned a lot. I think this is really, a great foundation for us to build on our work. And I was particularly taken by the whole idea of like an early warning system and how do we start to train folks. So I just kind of wanted to say that out loud, and we're going to do some planning around this for sure as a district.
Thank you so much, Letty. Anne?
I wanted to comment also on the early warning. That's so important. And it leads me to Yen's FAFSA situation. We have career and college specialists that are classified employees, and they do offer those types of meetings and seminars and things for parents. Are they at times that are accessible to all our families? Are we doing everything we can? We could do better there. But we also, and this is starting to happen through Student Support Services, Mr. Bailey's department, we have a liaison who's seeing the program through year to year, because we have been maintaining funding, so as the county, but we're starting to see that, and that's where the connections are being built with our principals, with possibly counselors, teachers, support staff, other youth mentors, so that we're following these kids all the way through wherever they end up at the high school level to get them that diploma. By maintaining that connection, we're helping them get that diploma, and we need to figure out how to fund that.
Thank you, Anne. Trustee Jones?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for this presentation. This is really important information, and I'm really glad to see the focus on these students. I think something for all of us to remember is that we can really be advocates. And as a trustee, we often hear from the community and from parents, and it can be very easy to listen to the voices that are in the room. And if you can imagine, for these students who are experiencing homelessness, their parents are very unlikely to have the resources and time and energy to be writing to the school board, to be showing up to meetings, to be making contact with the district in that way. And so it's really important that as we move forward, we remember, especially for me, remember the folks who aren't in the room when we're making decisions, and that we have those people who understand this issue and can advocate doing so when you can. I think if this meeting is recorded, I think it would be really helpful to have, especially our new trustees who may be less familiar with the services that we provide to McKinney-Vento students, to have access to that. And maybe, Letty, it might be helpful for all the trustees to be sent a link to this, because it was a pretty comprehensive look at what we do. So I want to thank everybody, and hopefully that we can keep our focus on these students as well as we move forward. Just so talking about the budget, the governor's budget came out. It was overall good news, but we are still facing very significant cuts this coming year and next year, and that's after having cuts of 16 million and 22 million in the 2 prior years. So we're going to be having some difficult decisions to make, and I don't want to lose focus on all of our students, and especially the students that are going to need the most support, especially during this really difficult time.
Thank you so much, Diane. All right, so I want to thank Aaron and Greg. I think you can hear the appreciation the committee has for the information that you've shared with us tonight. And so I think we'll definitely be in touch, because as Letty shared, we're moving now this part of the year, we kind of move in to see how we're going to adjust, amend, increase, decrease funding in various areas. And so now having this as a lens moving forward will help. And I know we can count on you if we reach out for some more thoughts and recommendations. And yes, so Aaron, definitely, if you can send that to us, and then we can get that out to the members of the committee, and we can have it as a resource going forward. And yeah, and same, Greg, just so people know what we're doing already in FUSD. And then I think what we could work on later on the budget piece is how are those various things that you're already working on in your department funded? So for LCAAC, it's going to be useful to know should we try to increase funding? Are we already funding something? Is it as simple as maybe reaching out to other partners? So that sort of thing, as we look at monetary, will be good moving forward. Anna and Diane, I think those are just residual hands, right? So I think we're going to move on to our next item here. Okay, awesome. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Letty to talk about future, but if you can already have on your radar our last, hopefully very quick agenda item. Thank you so much, Greg. If you wanted to be our representative for the equity task force, and that has to be a parent or community member, not a staff member. So if you're thinking about that, then when we get to that next agenda item, we thought previously that tomorrow was going to be the first meeting, but it is now not happening tomorrow first. I think February will be the first meeting. So you've got a little bit of time. It's not an immediate thing, but we do need to select still our person. So Letty?
Thank you. Okay, I'm sharing my screen, so I'm hoping, can folks see that yet?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, perfect. So wanted to share, and I know I'm in the interest of time, and we can certainly revisit this, but I wanted to just give just a very quick overview. You've seen this before, just as a reminder, the LCAAP is a 3-year plan. It's to support positive outcomes for all of our students. It also is a response to our local and our state priorities. But really, as we heard tonight, it's about why programs and services are meeting the needs of students, specifically our unduplicated students, and how are we doing increased services for our students. It's comprised of goals and metrics, and all with stakeholder engagement. So I wanted to share this evening just kind of a global, big picture outlook on, and I'm going to ask Steve if he can take notes for me as well. I know we have minutes, but also kind of take some notes for us. Just kind of backwards mapping what is going to come up. So in fact, I'm going to go forward and I'll go back. So as you see here, and in June, we must have a final approved LCAAP and budget submitted to the Board of Education before June 30th. And that includes a public hearing where the budget for the district along with LCAAP comes forward, and then a final approval before that. So if we were to backwards map that for our work, I started to kind of chunk out what we've done in the past and what are the recommendations from CDE. I want to share that the template is not out yet, but I am signed up for a training along with Steve around the LCAAP and what's coming up. So we hope to learn more soon from CDE, but things are a bit delayed on that front. But what I was looking at was that we've got our February meeting that's coming up, and that would be a time to look at budget, to look at survey and the data collection, perhaps at that point reviewing the survey. That might be a little bit too ambitious, and I'll have to check in with Steve on that because the survey has not been sent out quite yet. It's ready to get sent out, and I'll share a little bit about that later. It would be a meeting where we start to look at the data, identifying trends, but then perhaps looking at some presentations around climate and mental health, because we know that that is also a big topic for our community, as it is with most districts, but there might be that possibility to learn more about that. And then I was moving forward with March and looking at continuing input and trends, a time to look at goals 1 and 2 and start to look at our actions as they're tied to goals. At this point, we will also have input from the schools. If you remember from the last time, Mr. Benavides was sharing how our team from instructional services goes out to do some presentations at the sites to get some input from folks. And then we would bring that back for all of you to review and start to look at some trends. In April, and yes, that means we're going to need more meetings. I know we've only calendared out February and March, but in April, we would continue to look at goals 3 and 4 and start to look at actions tied to goals, review input from our District English Learner Advisory Committee, from our DLAC. May, crossing my fingers that we're able to bring forward, we should bring a draft of the LCAAP to all of you to look at, additional input and review, all in preparation for June and July, where our Board of Education will have a public hearing for additional input from our board. We would then incorporate that input before the final approval that would come forward to our board in the second meeting in June, all with the target of turning this into the Alameda County Office of Education and submitting it and posting it all. So I know that's a lot of information, and in fact, let's see, did I stop sharing? Yes. In the interest of time, I'm thinking that perhaps we could maybe talk about what our next meeting's going to look like, and then let folks kind of, and I'll share this and attach this to the agenda so you all have time to look at it, and maybe we can give further input at our next meeting to calendar it out and give you all time to kind of think about it. As you can see, there's going to be a lot of work between now and February, and then again in March, in just getting input and hearing from other stakeholders. And then again, reviewing, as what Victoria was saying earlier, you know, the effectiveness or how things are funded, and really what are the action items tied to these goals. And by then we will also have draft budgets. We will have that information so we can really make some pretty good decisions and recommendations to our Board of Education.
So thank you so much, Letty. And I think that looking at what has taken time in the past, if next month we do have budget, there's actually two components to budget that I think that the committee will need. One is what we've done historically every year, which is we look line item by line item and we see how much we had budgeted for and how much we expended. And we get that reasoning from district staff, and we get that update, because that's one piece of that budget information looking forward. The other is the outlook on budget, and whether we're looking at the same amount of funding, or if, and hopefully we'll already have had the business presentation later on this month, so that if the governor's proposal included targeted increases, we might include that in our goals. So I think that's already a lot for the committee, as well as the presentation on mental health and how that ties in with our unduplicated students. So I think we're good on timeline if we get to the survey results in March. That looks like a really good flow. Do you want to try to look at a couple dates now? Is that better?
That would be wonderful. I think that would be good, so we can start planning that.
Okay. So so we already have scheduled February 22nd, so that should already be on everyone's radar, right? Okay. So keeping with Monday evening, a month later, either the 22nd or the 29th, do we have other district meetings already?
I think we already have March 22nd, if I'm not.
We're good, March 22nd. Okay. Yeah. All right. Excellent. Okay. So then a month later, April 19th or 26th.
I'm looking on the district calendar myself, but if anybody else wants to weigh in.
And Trustee Jones would have whatever committees she's on and know what works with.
Yeah, for me, I'm fine either of those days in April. To the extent, I know the March one is already on the calendar. To the extent that it matters, I have an overlapping meeting with the special ed committee that night, but it would just mean I'd be late showing up to LCAAC, which, as long as everybody's fine with that, I wouldn't want to have to change committee meetings just based on my schedule.
Just to confirm, we had a March 22nd or March 29th?
22nd. 22nd.
Yeah. So
I also had April 26th on my calendar.
Okay. And I think that was going to be better anyways, because we had spring break for a week, right? So the 19th would kind of be really, really fast. So then April 22nd, excellent.
I also had May 24th.
Oh.
And I think those were the ones we had thrown around. The April 26th does look good on a district calendar. Okay. Better than the 19th. So
okay.
Yeah, great. I had gone through and looked because tonight's meeting is interfering with technology advisory. So I had gone through and checked them all to make sure there were no more conflicts.
Got it. Yeah, and May 24th looks good on mine too. Letty or Diane, do you see any other conflicts if we did May 24th?
That looks good.
Looks good.
The following week is Memorial Day, so we're kind of pinned in there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So Letty, do you think that May 24th takes us out enough historically, we have had to have a June meeting at some point, but with Letty trying to stay on top of all the moving calendar parts for requirements, where we might not know exactly when in June might make sense right now anyhow. So I think we're good. So that looks good then for next month's agenda as well. So we're moving on now to our last agenda item. So any parent or community member who would like to be part of the equity task force. And Letty, did you want to speak a little bit about kind of what, I mean, we all kind of know what equity is. And I think a large part of why we're on this committee is we believe in equity and we understand that we're trying to allocate resources where they need to go to make sure that all students in FUSD can be successful. So Letty has had a great vision of having this task force really have touch points and like tentacles in all of our different committees and workings across the district to best support all of our students. Letty?
Yes, so we're looking at the Equity Task Force as really almost like a coordinating council where there are representatives from all of the different committees and task forces that we have throughout the district, where there's an expert everywhere, and it's this back and forth, because equity work is work we do across all programs and across all departments and all schools. So we're hoping to have a representative that can speak to what's happening at the LCAAC and then come back and perhaps report out and really be that liaison back and forth.
So is there anyone, I believe it's a once a month and it will start then in February, and you would liaise between what we're doing in LCAAC and obviously the things that we're learning and doing here, and be able to contribute at that table for equity to coordinate throughout the district. So is there anyone that already knew it was on their radar and they are really interested in perhaps doing that work? Any parent or community member position?
And if we want to, I don't know if a student would fit under a non-staff, because really that's what we were looking at, and if there aren't any.
Okay.
Separate student reps. I just wanted
to. Oh, you're right. I forgot.
Yeah,
I've looked at this so many times. I thank you, Nishi. You're correct.
Yeah, I think it did specifically say it. Like I put comma non-staff because I'm a parent and a community member, but I could not fill that role because it specifically also has to be non-staff. Diane?
I know when we initially set this up, we realized that we were going to be asking folks who had, signed up for one committee to essentially take on double duty. And I certainly don't want to force anybody into making a commitment that they're not ready or able to make. But I do think in cases where we don't have a parent volunteer, we're going to have to, hopefully allow for a staff member to take that position. Because I do think it's important for this committee to have representation on the equity committee. And I don't know if that'll need board approval, but I think maybe if anybody here wants to preliminarily offer to be the liaison, then we at least know we have someone queued up.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Lorona.
Days and stuff like that, and I didn't need to be appointed to whoever I need to speak with.
So we are fortunate to have Letty here because this is under her oversight as well.
Okay.
And to Diane's point, I'm happy to go as an alternate non-voting. So Lorona, if you're ever unable, I'm happy to go and chime in, but I would understand, Diane, that I wouldn't have voting rights because that wouldn't work. But then Lorona, we could be in contact. But that is awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
There's a typical and calling once, twice, 3 times in case there were other nominations, but we've been waiting for 5 minutes and we have our one. So I think we are good. So unless there's objection, then what we'll do is have Lorona be the official delegate there. And then Lorona would let me know if she's unable, and I could go share, but otherwise sit silently and not be a voting member. Is there any objection, which would also include that no, you've now decided you really want this position? Okay, all right, so seeing no objection, then that's what we'll do. Thank you all so much. And with that, we're still pretty on time because we started 6 minutes late and we're only ending 5 minutes late. So we are adjourned at 8:05. Thank you all so much.
All right. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.